My name is Sadie Cooper, and at 73 years old, I thought I had seen every possible way a child could break their parents' heart. I was wrong. The moment that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in March, when I was standing in my daughter's kitchen, soaking wet from the storm outside, holding nothing but a small overnight bag and what remained of my dignity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I had driven 3 hours through torrential rain to reach Emma's house in Millbrook, after she called me crying about her divorce proceedings and begging me to come help her with the kids while she sorted through the legal mess. She sounded so broken on the phone, so much like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, that I didn't hesitate. I canceled my evening plans, threw some clothes into a bag, and drove through weather that should have kept any sensible person indoors. When I knocked on her front door, dripping and exhausted, Emma barely looked up from her laptop. She was sitting at the kitchen island, surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun that reminded me painfully of how she used to look when she was cramming for college exams. The house was eerily quiet, which struck me as odd since she had mentioned the kids needing help. "Where are Madison and Tyler?" I asked, setting my bag down by the door and shaking rainwater from my coat. "Oh, they're at their dad's this week," Emma said without looking up from her screen. "I forgot to mention that when I called." The first prickle of unease crept up my spine. "Then why did you say you needed help with them?" She waved her hand dismissively, still typing. "I meant help in general. This divorce is consuming my life, Mom. I can't think straight." I stood there for a moment, watching my daughter, who had inherited my stubborn streak and her father's sharp tongue, and tried to push down the growing sense that something wasn't right. Emma had always been dramatic, even as a child, but there was something different about her demeanor tonight. Something cold. "Well, I'm here now," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "What can I do to help?" She finally looked up, and I was startled by how tired she looked. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin had that pale, drawn quality that comes from too much stress and too little sleep. For a moment, my maternal instincts overrode everything else, and I just wanted to wrap her in my arms like I used to when she was small. "Actually, Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about," she said, closing the laptop with a sharp click. "Why don't you sit down?" The kitchen was exactly the kind of space Emma had always dreamed of having. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, with a massive island that could seat 8 people comfortably. It was the kind of kitchen that belonged in a magazine, pristine and expensive, but somehow it felt cold to me. Not like the warm, cluttered kitchen where I had raised her, where every surface held memories, and the refrigerator was covered with her artwork and school photos. I pulled out one of the high-backed bar stools and perched on the edge, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. The drive had been longer than I remembered, and my lower back was protesting from hours hunched over the steering wheel. "This divorce is getting ugly, Mom," Emma began, her voice taking on that rehearsed quality she used when she was preparing to ask for something. "Richard's trying to take everything. The house, the kids, even my car. His lawyer is claiming I'm financially irresponsible and that I can't provide a stable home environment." I felt my heart clench. Emma had always been my fighter, the child who refused to back down from any challenge. Seeing her defeated like this was almost unbearable. "What does your lawyer say?" "Surely there are options." "That's just it," she said, leaning forward with her elbows on the counter. "My lawyer is good, but Richard's is better, more expensive, more connected. I'm running out of money to fight this, and if I lose..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "If you lose, what?" "I lose everything, Mom. My kids, my home, my future. I'll have nothing left." The words hung between us like a challenge, and I felt that familiar maternal instinct kick in. The same one that had driven me to work double shifts when she was young so she could have dance lessons and summer camps. The same one that had made me sell my grandmother's jewelry to help pay for her college tuition when the scholarships fell through. "What do you need?" I asked quietly. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she finally looked up, There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. Something that made my stomach tighten with apprehension. "I need you to sell the lake house." The words hit me like a physical blow. The lake house in Cedar Falls had been my sanctuary for over 20 years. The place I had retreated to after her father died, where I had slowly rebuilt my life piece by piece. It wasn't just a house to me. It was the place where I had learned to be alone without being lonely, where I had discovered that I could be happy on my own terms. "Emma, you know I can't do that," I said carefully. "That house is my home." "It's just sitting there, Mom," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You rattle around in that big place all by yourself. It's not practical. And it's worth at least $400,000, probably more in this market." $400,000. She had obviously looked into it, done her research. The realization that she had been calculating the value of my home, probably for weeks or months, felt like a betrayal I wasn't prepared for. "Emma, that house isn't just an investment to me. It's where I built my life after your father died. It's where I want to spend my remaining years." "Your remaining years?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, you're 73 years old. How many years do you really think you have left? And what's the point of spending them alone in the middle of nowhere when you could help your daughter save her family?" The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. I stared at her, this woman I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and wondered when she had become someone I didn't recognize. "I'm not asking you to give me the money for nothing," she continued, apparently oblivious to the impact of what she had just said. "You could come live here with me. I have plenty of space, and the kids would love having their grandmother around more. It would be perfect." Perfect for her, maybe. But as I looked around the cold, sterile kitchen, I couldn't imagine anything less perfect for me. This wasn't a home where I would be a welcome guest. This was a place where I would be a convenient caretaker, a live-in babysitter and housekeeper, who happened to also be providing the funds to maintain Emma's lifestyle. "I need to think about this," I said finally. Emma's expression hardened. "Think about what?" "Your daughter needs help, Mom. This is what family does for each other." Family. The word felt bitter in my mouth suddenly. Because if this was what family looked like, maybe I had been doing it wrong all these years. "I'm tired, Emma. It's been a long drive, and I'm not thinking clearly. Can we talk about this tomorrow?" She sighed dramatically, the same sigh she had perfected as a teenager when I refused to let her do something she wanted. "Fine, but Mom, I need an answer soon. Richard's lawyer filed another motion today, and my attorney says we need to respond with proof that I have financial backing. Or they're going to petition for emergency custody." Emergency custody. The threat hung in the air between us, unspoken but clear. "Help me, or lose access to your grandchildren. Where should I put my things?" I asked, standing up and reaching for my overnight bag. "Oh, about that," Emma said, not meeting my eyes. "The guest room is being used as storage right now for all my legal documents, and Tyler's room is still a mess from his sleepover last weekend. Would you mind just sleeping in the den tonight? The couch is actually pretty comfortable." The den. I had seen it when I walked in. A small, windowless room off the kitchen that Emma used as an office. The couch was barely long enough for someone my height, and it looked about as comfortable as a church pew. "That's fine," I said, because what else could I say? But as I followed her into the den, carrying my bag and feeling older than I had in years, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked into something I didn't understand. Something that had been planned and orchestrated without my knowledge. The den was worse than I had imagined. The couch was covered in a rough, scratchy fabric that looked like it belonged in a doctor's waiting room, and the room smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and something else I couldn't identify. Emma disappeared for a few minutes and returned with a thin blanket and a pillow that looked like it had seen better days. "I'm sorry it's not more comfortable," she said, but her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "I just haven't had time to organize things properly since the separation." I nodded and thanked her, though every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't how Emma usually treated guests, even unexpected ones. She had always been the type of person who went overboard with hospitality, making sure everyone was comfortable and well fed. But tonight she seemed almost resentful of my presence, as if I were an inconvenience rather than her mother, who had driven 3 hours through a storm to help her. After she left me alone in the den, I sat on the edge of the uncomfortable couch and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Emma's request for money wasn't entirely unreasonable. Divorce could be financially devastating, and I knew she was under tremendous stress. But something about the way she had presented it, the casual dismissal of my attachment to my home, the calculated way she had looked into its value, made me feel like I was being manipulated rather than asked for help. I pulled out my phone and considered calling my sister Ruth, who had always been good at helping me sort through complicated family situations. But it was nearly 11 o'clock, and Ruth went to bed early these days.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Instead, I found myself scrolling through photos of the lake house, remembering why it meant so much to me. I had bought the house 15 years ago, after Emma's father died, and I realized I needed a complete change of scenery. It wasn't much to look at when I first saw it, just a modest 2-bedroom cabin with outdated fixtures and a dock that was falling apart. But it sat on 3 acres of wooded land, with 200 feet of pristine lakefront, and the moment I walked onto the property, I knew I was home. I had spent the first year renovating it myself, learning skills I never knew I had. YouTube became my best friend as I figured out how to install new flooring, paint kitchen cabinets, and repair the dock. It was hard work, but it was also healing work. Every improvement I made felt like I was rebuilding myself along with the house. The lake house had become more than just my home. It was my refuge, my creative space, my sanctuary. I had my art studio in the converted garage, where I spent hours painting landscapes and portraits that I sold at local galleries. I had my garden, where I grew vegetables and flowers that I shared with neighbors. I had my morning routine of coffee on the dock, watching the sun rise over the water and feeling grateful for the quiet peace that surrounded me. Emma was right about one thing. The house was probably worth more than $400,000 now. Property values around the lake had skyrocketed in recent years, as more people discovered the area. But the idea of selling it, of giving up the life I had built there, felt like giving up a piece of my soul. I was still awake when I heard Emma moving around upstairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the house as she got ready for bed. The house was large enough that I shouldn't have been able to hear her so clearly, but the thin walls and poor insulation made every sound carry. I listened to her brushing her teeth, running water, closing doors, and finally the creak of her bed as she settled in for the night. Only then did I realize I could hear something else. A soft, whimpering sound coming from somewhere nearby. I sat up, straining to listen, and after a moment I identified the source. There was a dog somewhere in the house, probably in the kitchen or mudroom, and it sounded distressed. I got up and crept out of the den, following the sound. In the mudroom off the kitchen, I found a large German Shepherd mix lying on an expensive-looking dog bed, surrounded by toys and food bowls. The dog looked up at me with sad, intelligent eyes, his tail giving a tentative wag. "Hello, boy," I whispered, kneeling down to pet him. He was beautiful, with thick, glossy fur and the kind of noble bearing that German Shepherds are known for. His collar read Rex, and he seemed desperate for attention, nuzzling against my hand and sighing contentedly when I scratched behind his ears. It occurred to me that Emma hadn't mentioned having a dog, which seemed odd. Rex was clearly well cared for, with an expensive collar and what looked like premium food in his bowls. He didn't seem like a recent addition to the household, so why hadn't she mentioned him? I spent a few more minutes with Rex, who seemed grateful for the company, before returning to the den. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there were layers to this situation I wasn't seeing, secrets Emma wasn't sharing with me. I finally fell asleep sometime after midnight, but it was a restless sleep full of strange dreams and uncomfortable positions on the too small couch. I woke up several times during the night, my back aching and my neck stiff, wondering what I had gotten myself into. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been run over by a truck. The couch had been even more uncomfortable than I had anticipated, and I had a crick in my neck that made it painful to turn my head. I could hear Emma moving around upstairs, the sound of her shower running, and then the hairdryer. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to start some coffee and maybe find something to eat. But as I reached for the coffee maker, I heard Emma's voice from the top of the stairs. "Mom, Could you take Rex out for his morning walk? I'm running late for a meeting with my lawyer. Rex, so she did know about the dog. I looked toward the mudroom, where I could see Rex waiting patiently by the back door, his leash in his mouth. Of course, I called back, though I was still wearing the clothes I had slept in and hadn't even had a chance to brush my teeth. Emma came downstairs a few minutes later, dressed in a sharp business suit and carrying a briefcase. She looked polished and professional, nothing like the distraught woman I had comforted the night before. Thanks, Mom. Rex usually gets about a 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. The route is pretty straightforward, just follow the sidewalk and he'll show you the way. She grabbed a travel mug of coffee from the counter and headed toward the garage, pausing only to call over her shoulder, I should be back by noon. We can talk more about the house then. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with Rex and a growing sense of unease about the entire situation. I took Rex for his walk, grateful for the fresh air and exercise after the uncomfortable night. He was a well-behaved dog, clearly accustomed to a regular routine, and he seemed to know exactly where he wanted to go. The neighborhood was upscale and quiet, with large houses set back from tree-lined streets. It was the kind of place where people worked hard to maintain appearances, where every lawn was perfectly manicured and every house looked like it belonged in a home and garden magazine. As we walked, I found myself thinking about Emma's behavior the night before. The more I replayed our conversation, the more troubled I became. It wasn't just the request for money that bothered me, though that was certainly part of it. It was the way she had made the request, as if my feelings about the lake house were irrelevant, as if my life and happiness were secondary to her needs. When had Emma become so self-centered? I tried to remember if she had always been this way or if this was something new brought on by the stress of her divorce. But as much as I wanted to blame her behavior on temporary circumstances, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was who Emma really was, and I had simply been too blind to see it. When we returned from the walk, I fed Rex and then made myself some breakfast, trying to feel at home in Emma's sterile kitchen. Everything was spotless and expensive, but there was no warmth to it, no signs of the family that supposedly lived there. No children's artwork on the refrigerator, no family photos on the counters, no evidence of the messy, chaotic life that comes with raising kids. I was washing my breakfast dishes when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's name, and I answered expecting to hear that she was on her way home. Instead, I heard Emma's voice, but she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to someone else, and it was clear she had pocket-dialed me by accident. I know it's manipulative, but I don't have a choice, Emma was saying. She's sitting on a gold mine, and she's too stubborn to see that she doesn't need it. An old woman living alone in a house that big? It's ridiculous. My blood ran cold as I realized she was talking about me. No, I don't feel bad about it, Emma continued. She's my mother. It's her responsibility to help me. And it's not like she's using the house for anything important. She just sits there, painting her little pictures and pretending she's some kind of artist. Little pictures. The dismissive way she said it made my chest tighten with hurt and anger. Those little pictures had been my salvation after her father died, my way of rebuilding my identity and my confidence. I had sold dozens of paintings over the years, built a modest but successful reputation in the local art community. But to Emma, it was just a hobby, something expendable. Look, I'll wear her down, Emma was saying. A few nights on that awful couch and she'll be ready to agree to anything. And if that doesn't work, I'll play the grandchildren card. She'd do anything to make sure she doesn't lose access to Madison and Tyler. The grandchildren card. The casual way she spoke about manipulating my love for my grandchildren made me feel sick. These were Emma's own children, my flesh and blood, and she was talking about using them as weapons against me. She'll come around, Emma concluded. She always does. Mom's a pushover when it comes to family. She'll give me what I need, and then everyone will be happy. The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear, reeling from what I had just heard. A pushover. That's what my daughter thought of me. A convenient source of money and support. Someone who could be manipulated and controlled whenever she needed something. I set the phone down on the counter with shaking hands and looked around the pristine kitchen, seeing it with new eyes. This wasn't a home where I was welcomed as a beloved mother and grandmother. This was a trap, carefully constructed to make me so uncomfortable that I would agree to anything to escape. The uncomfortable couch wasn't an oversight or a lack of preparation. It was deliberate. Emma had wanted me to be miserable, had planned for me to be so uncomfortable that I would be desperate to find a solution, any solution, that would allow me to leave. And the dog, Rex, who clearly belonged to Emma, but who she had somehow failed to mention until she needed someone to take care of him. Another small manipulation, another way of making me feel obligated and useful. I walked back to the mudroom where Rex was lying on his expensive bed, and I knelt down to pet him again. He looked up at me with those intelligent eyes, and I wondered if he sensed my distress. "You're a good boy, aren't you, Rex?" I whispered. "Too bad your owner doesn't deserve you." As I scratched behind his ears, I noticed something I had missed the night before. Rex's bed wasn't just expensive. It was enormous, easily large enough for a person to sleep on. Larger and more comfortable than the couch Emma had relegated me to. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. My daughter thought so little of me that she considered me less deserving of comfort than her dog. She had literally given her pet better sleeping accommodations than her own mother. I stood up slowly, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had discovered. This wasn't just about money or manipulation. This was about how Emma saw me, how she valued me. And what I saw was that she didn't value me at all. I was nothing more than a resource to be exploited, a problem to be managed, an inconvenience to be tolerated until I served my purpose. The hurt was so deep and so sharp that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was my child, the baby I had carried and nurtured and loved unconditionally for 35 years. I had sacrificed my own dreams and ambitions to give her every opportunity, had worked multiple jobs to pay for her education, had been there for every scraped knee and broken heart and milestone moment. And this was how she repaid me, with manipulation and lies and casual cruelty. I walked back to the den and sat on the edge of the uncomfortable couch, staring at my overnight bag and trying to process what I had learned. Emma would be home in a few hours, expecting to continue her campaign to convince me to sell my house. She would probably be sympathetic and understanding, maybe even apologetic about the accommodations. She would tell me how much she loved me and how grateful she was for everything I had done for her. And it would all be lies. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was seeing my daughter clearly, without the rose-colored glasses of maternal love and hope. And what I saw was someone I didn't like very much. But even as I sat there, hurt and angry and disillusioned, I knew I had a choice to make. I could confront Emma about what I had overheard, could have the difficult conversation about how her behavior was affecting me. I could try to salvage our relationship, maybe even help her understand how she was treating me. Or I could do something else entirely. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my financial advisor, Marcus Webb. Marcus had been handling my investments for over a decade, ever since I had started selling my paintings and needed someone to help me manage the unexpected income. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Sadie, how are you doing? It's been a while since we talked." "I'm fine, Marcus. Actually, I'm calling because I need some information about my accounts. Could you give me a current total of everything I have with you?" There was a pause, and I could hear the sound of typing as Marcus pulled up my files. "Let me see here. Your portfolio has been performing really well this year. Between your investment accounts, retirement funds, and the money market account, you're looking at just about $2.8 million. $2.8 million. I had known my investments were doing well, but I hadn't realized just how well. The paintings had sold better than I expected over the years, and Marcus had been conservative but smart with my money. Combined with the life insurance payout from Emma's father and the appreciation of my lake house, I had quietly accumulated a fortune I had never really thought about. Emma wanted me to sell my house for $400,000 so she could fight her divorce, but I was sitting on nearly $3 million that she didn't even know existed. "Sadie, are you still there?" Marcus's voice brought me back to the present. "Yes, I'm here. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If I wanted to liquidate everything, how quickly could you do it?" "Liquidate everything?" Sadie, what's going on? That doesn't sound like you. Marcus was right. It didn't sound like me. The old me would never have considered such a drastic step. The old me would have found a way to help Emma while protecting my own interests, would have tried to be the peacemaker and the problem solver, but the old me hadn't known what Emma really thought of her. The old me hadn't heard her own daughter dismiss her life, and her accomplishments as worthless, hadn't been treated like she was less important than a dog. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do, I told Marcus, but I want to know my options. If I needed to move everything quickly, could you help me? Of course I could help you. Most of your holdings are pretty liquid. I could probably have everything converted to cash within a week, if necessary. But Sadie, I have to ask, is someone pressuring you to do this? Because if they are, no one is pressuring me, Marcus. I'm just exploring possibilities. We talked for a few more minutes, with Marcus walking me through the logistics of liquidating assets and the tax implications of moving that much money at once. By the time I hung up, I had a clear picture of my financial situation and my options. I was a wealthy woman, wealthy enough that I never had to depend on anyone else for anything ever again. Wealthy enough that I could disappear tomorrow and live comfortably anywhere in the world I chose. More importantly, I was wealthy enough that I didn't have to tolerate being treated like garbage by my own daughter. I sat there in the uncomfortable den, surrounded by the cold sterility of Emma's house, and felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but it was being joined by something else, something harder and more determined. Emma thought I was a pushover, someone she could manipulate and control. She thought my life was worthless, my dreams were silly, my home was just an asset to be liquidated for her convenience. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. I spent the next hour walking through Emma's house with new eyes, seeing everything she had tried to hide from me. The guest bedroom she claimed was full of legal documents was actually pristine and empty, except for a few boxes stacked neatly in one corner. The boxes weren't even sealed, and when I lifted the flaps, I found old Christmas decorations and photo albums, not urgent legal papers. Tyler's room, which she said was too messy for me to use, was cleaner than most hotel rooms. The bed was made with military precision, and there wasn't so much as a sock on the floor. Both rooms had comfortable beds with quality linens, ceiling fans, and windows that let in natural light. Either one would have been infinitely more comfortable than the cramped den where I had spent the night. But Emma had wanted me uncomfortable. She had calculated that a miserable night would make me more pliable, more willing to agree to her demands. The realization made my skin crawl with a mixture of hurt and disgust. I found myself drawn back to the mudroom where Rex was resting. He lifted his head when I approached, his tail giving that same tentative wag. I sat down on the floor next to his bed, running my hands through his thick fur. "She treats you better than she treats me, doesn't she, boy?" I whispered. Rex leaned into my touch, and I felt tears prick at my eyes. At least one of us is valued in this house. As I sat there with Rex, my mind began to work through the implications of what I had discovered. Emma didn't just want my money. She wanted to control me, to manipulate me into giving up everything I had built for myself, so she could maintain her lifestyle. And she was confident it would work because she believed I was weak, dependent, and desperate for her approval. The old Sadie might have been exactly that. The old Sadie had spent decades trying to be the perfect mother, sacrificing her own needs and wants to make sure Emma had everything she needed. Even after Emma was grown and married, I had continued to put her first, helping with down payments and babysitting and emergency loans whenever she called. But sitting there on the floor of Emma's mudroom, treated like I was less worthy than her dog, I felt something crystallize inside me. I wasn't the same woman who had raised Emma. I had survived losing my husband, had built a successful art career from nothing, had created a life I loved on my own terms. I was strong and independent and capable of taking care of myself. More than that, I was wealthy. Wealthy enough that I never had to depend on Emma or anyone else for anything. The knowledge sat in my chest like a secret weapon, power Emma couldn't imagine I possessed. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus again. "Sadie, twice in one day? This is unusual for you. Marcus, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it quietly. I want you to set up a new account for me, something completely separate from everything I have now. Can you do that?" "Of course, but can I ask why?" I looked down at Rex, who was watching me with those intelligent eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. Because I'm about to disappear, and I don't want anyone to be able to find me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Sadie, are you in some kind of trouble? Do you need help? I'm not in trouble, Marcus, but I am in a situation where I need to protect myself from someone who wants to take advantage of me. Someone who thinks they know exactly how to manipulate me. Is this about Emma? Marcus had met Emma a few times over the years when she had accompanied me to meetings. He had always been polite, but I could tell he didn't particularly like her. Emma had a way of talking down to service providers, treating them like they were beneath her notice. Yes, it's about Emma. Marcus, I need you to promise me you won't tell her anything about my finances if she contacts you. Nothing at all. Client confidentiality is sacred to me, Sadie. You know that. But are you sure about this? Whatever you're planning sounds drastic. I'm more sure about this than I've been about anything in a long time. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing the logistics of what I wanted to do. Marcus would set up a new investment account at a different firm, one Emma would never think to look for. He would transfer half my assets there immediately, keeping the other half in our current arrangement to avoid raising any red flags with large transactions. He would also help me establish a new address and phone number, create what he called a quote, clean slate that would allow me to disappear completely if I chose to. It wasn't legal witness protection, but it was the financial equivalent, a way to vanish from Emma's life while maintaining my independence and security. This is going to take a few days to set up properly, Marcus warned me. Can you stay safe until then? I can take care of myself, Marcus. I've been doing it longer than you might think. After I hung up, I felt a sense of calm settle over me that I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since Emma had called me crying about her divorce, I felt like I was in control of the situation instead of being controlled by it. I spent the rest of the morning planning. I had my laptop with me, and I used Emma's Wi-Fi to research extended stay hotels in the area. I wasn't going to spend another night on that uncomfortable couch, being treated like an inconvenience in my own daughter's home. I also researched private investigators. If Emma could play games, so could I. I wanted to know exactly what her financial situation really was, whether her sob story about the divorce was even true, and what her real motivations were for trying to get my money. Around 11:30, I heard Emma's car in the driveway. I quickly closed my laptop and moved to the kitchen, not wanting her to know I had been making plans. Emma came through the door looking triumphant, carrying her briefcase and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How did your meeting go? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Really well, actually. My lawyer thinks we have a strong case, but he needs me to show proof of financial backing by the end of the week. So we need to get the ball rolling on selling your house. The casual way she said it, like my agreement was a foregone conclusion, made my jaw clench. But I forced myself to remain calm. Emma, we need to talk about this properly. This is a big decision for me. I know, Mom, and I appreciate how hard this must be. But you have to understand that this is about more than just money. This is about family. This is about making sure Madison and Tyler have a stable home with their mother. There it was, the grandchildren card, exactly as she had planned it. When was the last time I saw Madison and Tyler? I asked quietly. Emma looked surprised by the question. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. When was the last time I spent time with my grandchildren? Emma's eyes shifted away from mine. I don't know. Christmas, maybe. You know how busy things have been with the separation. Christmas. It was now March, which meant it had been 3 months since I had seen my grandchildren. And before Christmas, it had been Emma's birthday in September. I was seeing them less and less frequently. And when I did see them, it was always on Emma's terms. In Emma's house, according to Emma's schedule. If you're so concerned about me having a relationship with Madison and Tyler, why haven't you brought them to visit me at the lake house? I asked. Mom, you know how far it is. And the kids have so many activities here, it's just not practical. Not practical. Everything in Emma's life was about practicality, about what was easiest and most convenient for her. My feelings, my home, my life were all secondary to her convenience. "Let me ask you something else," I said. "If I sell my house and give you the money, where exactly would I live?" "I told you, you could live here with me. The kids would love it." "In the guest room that's supposedly full of legal documents?" Emma's face flushed slightly. "I could clear that out. Make space." "Or maybe I could sleep in Tyler's room, the one that's supposedly too messy for me to use?" Now Emma looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Mom, what are you getting at?" "I'm getting at the fact that you've been lying to me, Emma. There's nothing wrong with either of those rooms. You put me on that awful couch in the den because you wanted me to be miserable. You wanted me so uncomfortable that I'd agree to anything to get out of here." Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "That's not—" "I wasn't." "And let me ask you about Rex," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "When were you planning to mention that you had a dog?" "Rex isn't important. He's just what? Just more important than your mother?" "Because his bed is certainly more comfortable than where you had me sleep." Emma's face was now bright red, and I could see her struggling to find a response that would put her back in control of the conversation. "Mom, you're being paranoid. I was just trying to accommodate." "Stop lying to me, Emma." The words came out sharper than I had intended, but I was tired of pretending this was normal, tired of letting her manipulate me. Emma straightened up, and for a moment I saw a flash of something ugly in her expression. Something that reminded me of her father when he was angry, before he learned to control his temper. "Fine," she said. "You want honesty? Here's honesty. Yes, I need you to sell your house. Yes, I'm in financial trouble. And yes, I'm asking you to make a sacrifice for your family. That's what mothers do, Mom. They sacrifice for their children." "What mothers do," I repeated. "What about what daughters do? What about respect and gratitude, and treating the woman who raised you like she matters?" "Of course you matter. But Mom, you're 73 years old. You live alone in the middle of nowhere, painting pictures that nobody cares about. What kind of life is that?" Pictures that nobody cares about. The dismissive cruelty of it took my breath away. My art wasn't just a hobby to me, it was my passion, my identity, my way of connecting with the world. I had sold paintings to collectors from 3 states, had been featured in gallery shows, had earned the respect of other artists whose work I admired. But to Emma, it was worthless. Just like I was worthless. "You know what, Emma? You're right about one thing. I am 73 years old. Which means I've lived long enough to recognize manipulation when I see it. And I've lived long enough to know that I don't have to tolerate being treated like garbage by anyone, including my own daughter." I stood up and walked toward the den where I had left my overnight bag. "Where are you going?" Emma called after me. "I'm leaving." "Mom, don't be dramatic. We can work this out." I turned around to face her one more time. "Emma, I drove 3 hours through a storm because you called me crying and begging for help. I came here ready to do whatever I could to support you through a difficult time. But what I found was a daughter who thinks so little of me that she considers me less deserving of basic comfort than her dog." "That's not true. Isn't it? Rex gets a bed fit for a king, while I get a couch that would be rejected by a homeless shelter. Rex gets premium food and expensive toys, while I get lied to and manipulated. Rex gets respect and care, while I get treated like an inconvenience." Emma's face was pale now, and I could see that she was finally beginning to understand that her plan wasn't working the way she had expected. "Mom, please, I need your help." "No, Emma, you need my money. There's a difference." I picked up my bag and walked toward the front door. Emma followed me, her voice getting more desperate. "If you leave now, you'll regret it." "Mom, I'm serious. If you don't help me, I could lose everything." "Is that what you want?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob and looked back at her one last time. "Emma, I've given you everything I could give you your entire life. I worked double shifts to pay for your dance lessons. I sold my mother's jewelry to help with your college tuition. I babysat your children for free while you built your career. I've been there for every crisis, every emergency, every time you needed anything at all." My voice was steady, but I could feel tears threatening to spill over. "And in all those years, not once have you asked me what I needed. Not once have you shown interest in my life, my dreams, my happiness." All I've ever been to you is a resource to be exploited when convenient and ignored when not. That's not fair, Mom. What's not fair is a daughter who thinks her mother's life is worthless. What's not fair is being treated like a servant in my own daughter's house. What's not fair is having my love and generosity taken for granted for 35 years. I opened the door and stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air and feeling lighter than I had in months. Mom, wait. Please. I turned around one last time, and for a moment I thought I saw genuine remorse in Emma's eyes. For a moment I hoped she was finally going to apologize, to acknowledge how she had been treating me. Instead, she said, quote, "If you leave now, don't expect to see Madison and Tyler again. I won't have you poisoning them against me with your bitterness and resentment." The threat hit me like a physical blow. My grandchildren, the two bright lights in my life, used as weapons against me. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking, but instead of breaking me, Emma's words did something she probably didn't expect. They freed me. Because in that moment, I finally saw her clearly. Not as my daughter, not as the little girl I had raised and loved, but as the person she had chosen to become. Someone who would use her own children as leverage, who would threaten to withhold love and access as a way to control and manipulate. Someone I didn't want in my life anymore. "Goodbye, Emma," I said quietly, and walked to my car without looking back. As I drove away from Emma's house, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the relationship I had thought I had with my daughter. Relief to finally be free from her manipulation and control. I drove to the extended stay hotel I had researched earlier, a clean, modern place that catered to business travelers and people in transition. The woman at the front desk was professional and courteous, and when I asked for a room for an indefinite period, she didn't bat an eye. The room was simple but comfortable, with a kitchenette, a real bed, and a window that looked out over a small garden. It was 1,000 times more welcoming than Emma's sterile house, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I could breathe. I unpacked my few belongings and then sat on the bed, finally allowing myself to process what had just happened. I had walked away from my daughter, possibly forever. I had chosen my own dignity and self-respect over her manipulation and emotional blackmail. It should have felt devastating. Instead, it felt like liberation. My phone rang, and Emma's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. After the 5th call, I turned the phone off entirely. I ordered room service for dinner, something I never would have done at home but which felt appropriate for my new circumstances. As I ate, I made a list of everything I needed to do over the next few days. Call Marcus to expedite the financial arrangements we had discussed. Contact a private investigator to look into Emma's real situation. Most importantly, start planning what my new life was going to look like. Because that's what this was. Not just an escape from Emma's manipulation, but an opportunity to reinvent myself completely. At 73, I was about to start over, and for the first time in years, I was excited about the possibilities. The next morning, I woke up feeling more rested than I had in months. The hotel bed was comfortable, the room was quiet, and nobody had tried to manipulate me or make me feel worthless. It was a good start. Marcus called me around 9 o'clock to update me on the progress of setting up my new financial arrangements. "Everything is moving faster than I expected," he said. "I have some contacts who are able to expedite the paperwork. You should have access to your new account by this afternoon." "That's wonderful, Marcus. Thank you for taking care of this so quickly." "Sadie, I have to ask. Emma has been calling my office repeatedly since yesterday. She seems quite agitated. Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" "I'm absolutely sure. Did she say what she wanted?" "She's demanding information about your financial situation. She seems to think you're hiding assets from her." I almost laughed. Emma was smarter than I had given her credit for. She had probably realized that someone with my lifestyle and independence might have more resources than she had assumed. "What did you tell her?" "Exactly what I told you I would tell her. Nothing. Client confidentiality is absolute, and she has no legal right to information about your accounts." "Good. Marcus, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that she might try to escalate this." She might claim I'm mentally incompetent or that someone is taking advantage of me. I want you to know that I am completely in control of my faculties and my decisions. I never doubted that for a second, Sadie. And if she tries to make any legal claims, I have documentation of all our conversations that will prove your competency beyond any doubt. After I hung up with Marcus, I called the private investigator I had researched, a woman named Carol Zhang, who specialized in family financial investigations. Carol had excellent reviews and a reputation for discretion. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe near my hotel, and I explained what I needed to know about Emma's situation. I want to understand if her financial crisis is real or if this is just another manipulation, I told Carol. I want to know about the divorce proceedings, her debts, her assets, everything. Carol nodded thoughtfully. These kinds of investigations usually take a few days to a week, depending on how cooperative the public records are. But I can tell you right now that if someone is pressuring you for money based on a crisis, it's worth verifying the facts. How often do you find that the crisis isn't what it appears to be? More often than you might think. People exaggerate their problems when they're trying to get money from family members. Sometimes they flat out lie. The possibility that Emma had been lying about everything, that her tears and desperation had been nothing more than an elaborate performance, made my stomach turn, but it also steeled my resolve to find out the truth. I spent the rest of the day shopping for clothes and personal items, things I would need if I was going to be away from home for an extended period. It felt strange to be buying a new life one purchase at a time, but it was also oddly exhilarating. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on and found 17 missed calls from Emma and 6 voicemails. I listened to them in chronological order, watching as Emma's tone evolved from confused to angry to desperate to threatening. The first message was almost reasonable. Mom, I don't understand why you left like that. Please call me back so we can work this out. By the third message, her tone had shifted. Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being childish and selfish. I need your help, and you're throwing a tantrum instead of acting like an adult. The fifth message was pure manipulation. Mom, Madison asked where Grandma was today, and I didn't know what to tell her. You're hurting your grandchildren with this behavior. The last message was a threat. Mom, if you don't call me back by tomorrow, I'm going to assume something has happened to you, and I'll file a missing person report. I'll also contact your bank and your lawyer to make sure no one is taking advantage of you. I deleted all the messages without responding and turned the phone off again. Emma was escalating exactly as I had expected, trying every manipulation technique in her arsenal to regain control of the situation. But I was done being controlled. The next morning, Carol called with preliminary results from her investigation. Sadie, are you sitting down? Because what I found is going to surprise you. I was in the hotel's small business center, using their computer to research retirement communities in warm climates, just in case I decided I never wanted to go back to the lake house. I'm ready, I said. Your daughter isn't in financial trouble. In fact, she's quite wealthy. She and her husband own property worth over $2 million, and their combined annual income last year was just under $400,000. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. But the divorce is real, but it's not the financial disaster she made it out to be. Based on the court filings, they're negotiating a pretty standard split of assets. She'll walk away with at least $1 million in property and investments, plus substantial alimony and child support. Then why would she need my money? That's where it gets interesting. I did some digging into her spending patterns, and your daughter has very expensive tastes. She's been living well above even their substantial means for years. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, private schools for the kids, country club memberships. The divorce isn't making her poor, Sadie. It's just making her slightly less rich. The betrayal was complete. Emma hadn't been facing financial ruin. She had been facing the possibility of having to live within her means, and she had decided it was easier to manipulate her mother into giving up her life savings than to adjust her lifestyle. There's more, Carol continued. I found evidence that she's been planning this for months. She consulted with a financial advisor back in December about the best way to convince elderly relatives to liquidate assets. The advisor's notes specifically mentioned strategies for creating urgency and guilt. December. Emma had been planning to manipulate me since December, months before she called me crying about her divorce. The whole thing had been a calculated scheme to steal my money and my independence. Carol, I need you to document everything you've found. Every piece of evidence, every financial record, every communication. I want it all in writing. Are you planning to take legal action? I don't know yet, but I want to be prepared for whatever comes next. After I hung up with Carol, I sat in the hotel business center staring at the computer screen, trying to process the magnitude of Emma's deception. This wasn't just manipulation or selfishness. This was fraud, plain and simple. She had deliberately lied to me about her financial situation in order to steal my money. More than that, she had been planning it for months. While I was sending her Christmas presents and birthday cards, while I was missing her and looking forward to our next visit, she was plotting to take advantage of me. The hurt was so deep I could barely breathe. But underneath the hurt was something else, something harder and more determined. Anger. Pure, clean, justified anger at being betrayed by the person I had loved most in the world. I had spent my entire adult life putting Emma first, sacrificing my own needs and dreams to make sure she had every opportunity. And she had repaid me by seeing me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. Well, Emma was about to learn that she had gravely underestimated her mother. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. Marcus, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it today. What do you need, Sadie? I want you to liquidate everything. All of it. I want every dollar I have moved into accounts Emma can never access, and I want it done immediately. Sadie, that's a major step. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Emma thinks she's playing a game with someone who doesn't know the rules. She's about to find out exactly how wrong she is. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was no longer the same woman who had driven through a storm to help her daughter. Marcus had worked with lightning speed, calling in favors and expediting transfers that normally would have taken weeks. Every dollar I had was now safely locked away in accounts that existed only in my name, with passwords and security measures that would take a team of forensic accountants months to unravel. I was officially invisible. While Marcus handled the financial arrangements, I had been busy with my own preparations. I checked out of the extended stay hotel and into a luxury suite at the Grandview Resort, a 5-star property an hour outside the city that catered to wealthy retirees and business executives who valued privacy above all else. The suite was everything Emma's house wasn't. Warm, welcoming, with soft furnishings and original artwork on the walls. The bed was larger than my bedroom at the lake house, and the bathroom had a soaking tub that looked out over manicured gardens. Most importantly, it felt like a place where I was valued and respected. I had also hired a team of professionals to help me execute what I was starting to think of as my strategic withdrawal from Emma's life. A personal assistant named Jennifer, who specialized in helping high-net-worth individuals manage complex transitions. A security consultant named David, who would ensure my privacy and safety. And most crucially, a lawyer named Patricia Hoffman, who had built her reputation on protecting wealthy clients from family members who tried to exploit them. Patricia was exactly what I needed. Sharp, experienced, and completely unsympathetic to emotional manipulation. We met in her office late that afternoon, a corner suite in one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Mrs. Cooper, Patricia said as we shook hands, I've reviewed the documentation your investigator provided, and I have to say, your daughter's behavior constitutes textbook financial abuse of an elderly relative. You would have grounds for criminal charges if you chose to pursue them. The idea of having Emma arrested was tempting, but I had something else in mind, something that would be far more effective than criminal charges. I don't want her in jail, Patricia. I want her to understand that actions have consequences. I want her to learn that she can't manipulate and exploit people without facing the results of her choices. Patricia nodded approvingly. What did you have in mind? I had been thinking about this all day, ever since Carol's investigation had revealed the full scope of Emma's deception. Emma's entire plan had been based on the assumption that I was weak, dependent, and desperate for her approval. She had counted on me being the same pushover I had always been, someone who would sacrifice anything to maintain family harmony. She was about to discover that assumption was catastrophically wrong. "I want to disappear completely," I told Patricia. "I want Emma to wake up tomorrow and find that her mother no longer exists in any form she can access or control. I want her to realize that she has lost the one person who truly loved her, and I want her to understand that it's entirely her own fault." "That's certainly possible," Patricia said. "But are you prepared for the reality of what that means? Once you cut ties completely, there's usually no going back. Family relationships, especially between parents and children, are difficult to repair once they've been severed." I thought about Emma's threat to keep me away from Madison and Tyler, about the casual way she had dismissed my life's work, about the months of planning she had put into manipulating me. Most of all, I thought about how she had made me sleep on that miserable couch while her dog enjoyed luxury accommodations. "Patricia, my daughter made her choice when she decided to treat me like I was worthless. I'm simply responding in kind." We spent the next 2 hours crafting what Patricia called a comprehensive disengagement strategy. Legal documents that would revoke Emma's power of attorney, remove her from my will, and establish clear boundaries around any future contact. Financial arrangements that would make it impossible for Emma to access or even locate my assets. Communication protocols that would ensure any attempts to reach me would be filtered through Patricia's office. Most importantly, we prepared a detailed response to what Patricia assured me would be Emma's inevitable escalation. When Emma realized she had lost control of the situation, she would almost certainly try to have me declared mentally incompetent or claim that I was being manipulated by unscrupulous advisors. Patricia had dealt with dozens of similar cases, and she knew exactly how to protect me from that kind of attack. "Your daughter will probably hire a lawyer within the next few days," Patricia warned me. "She'll claim you're not capable of making sound financial decisions, that someone is taking advantage of you, that you need protection from yourself. Are you prepared for that kind of fight?" "I'm prepared for whatever she throws at me. The difference between now and 2 days ago is that I finally understand who she really is. I'm not fighting for a relationship that was based on lies and manipulation. I'm fighting for my right to live my life without being exploited." By the time I left Patricia's office, I felt like I was wearing armor. Not just legal and financial protection, but emotional armor as well. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting my own needs first, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I returned to my suite at the Grandview and ordered dinner from room service, something I was quickly learning to enjoy. As I ate, I reviewed the documents Patricia had prepared, marveling at how thoroughly they severed every connection between Emma and my life. Tomorrow, I would put the final phase of my plan into motion. But tonight, I wanted to enjoy the strange peace that came with knowing I was finally free from Emma's manipulation. My phone rang around 8 o'clock. Emma's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered answering, just to hear what new manipulation she had prepared. Instead, I let it go to voicemail and turned the phone off. I was done being available whenever Emma decided she needed something from me. I ran a bath in the enormous tub, poured myself a glass of wine from the complimentary bottle the hotel had provided, and sank into water that was exactly the right temperature. As I soaked, I thought about the lake house, about my art studio and my garden, and the quiet mornings on the dock. For a moment, I felt a pang of homesickness so sharp it took my breath away. But then I reminded myself that I could go back any time I wanted. The lake house was still mine, still waiting for me. The difference was that now I knew Emma would never again be able to threaten to take it away from me. The next morning, I woke early and spent an hour on the phone with Marcus, reviewing the final details of my financial transformation. Every account had been moved, every asset had been protected, every connection to my old financial identity had been severed. Emma could hire the best private investigators in the country, Marcus told me, and they wouldn't be able to find a penny of your money. As far as the financial world is concerned, you're starting completely fresh. What about the lake house? That's been transferred to a trust with a name she'll never think to search for. Legally, you no longer own it. Practically, you have complete control over it for the rest of your life, and she can never touch it. The relief was overwhelming. My sanctuary was safe, no matter what Emma tried to do. After breakfast, I called Jennifer, my new personal assistant. and asked her to arrange for a moving company to pack up my belongings from the lake house and put them in storage. I wasn't ready to go back there yet, not until I was sure Emma had gotten the message that her manipulation days were over. "Should I leave a forwarding address?" Jennifer asked. "No forwarding address, no phone number, no way for anyone to contact me except through Patricia's office. And if someone comes looking for you, then they'll find exactly what I want them to find. Nothing." The moving company was discreet and professional, exactly what I needed for this kind of operation. They would pack everything I owned and transport it to a climate-controlled storage facility that existed only in the name of my new trust. Even I wouldn't know the exact location until the job was complete. It felt strange to be erasing my own existence, but it also felt necessary. Emma had forced this choice on me when she decided to treat me like a resource instead of a person. Around noon, Patricia called with an update I had been expecting. "Emma hired a lawyer this morning. Thomas Bradley from Bradley and Associates. He's competent, but not particularly creative. They've already filed a petition claiming you're mentally incapacitated and requesting emergency conservatorship. How long do we have? They're asking for an expedited hearing, which means probably early next week. But Sadie, this is exactly what we prepared for. I have documentation going back months showing your mental competency, your financial sophistication, and your complete understanding of every decision you've made. Emma's case is going to fall apart the moment I present our evidence." "What kind of evidence does she think she has?" "According to the filing, she's claiming that your recent financial moves are evidence of diminished capacity. She's also alleging that unidentified advisors have manipulated you into making decisions against your own interests." I almost laughed. Emma was so convinced that I was weak and stupid that she couldn't imagine I was capable of outmaneuvering her. She literally could not conceive of a world in which her mother was smarter and more resourceful than she was. "Patricia, I want you to do something for me. I want you to invite Emma to a meeting. Tell her you're willing to discuss a resolution to this situation, but make it clear that any meeting will be recorded and that she'll be under oath. Are you sure you want to face her directly? These confrontations can be emotionally difficult. I'm sure. Emma needs to hear directly from me that her manipulation has failed. She needs to understand that I know exactly what she tried to do to me, and she needs to face the consequences of her choices." Patricia scheduled the meeting for the following afternoon at her office. She would present it to Emma's lawyer as a good-faith attempt to resolve the conservatorship petition without going to court. But the real purpose was to give Emma one final chance to understand what she had lost. I spent the rest of the day preparing emotionally for what I knew would be a difficult confrontation. I wasn't nervous about facing Emma, exactly, but I was sad about what our relationship had become. Despite everything she had done, part of me still grieved for the daughter I thought I had raised, the woman I had hoped she would become. But grief and sadness weren't going to change the facts. Emma had made her choices, and now she would have to live with the consequences. That evening, I called Carol to get an update on her investigation into Emma's finances. "I've been digging deeper into her spending patterns," Carol told me, "and I found something interesting. Your daughter has been liquidating assets for months, even before she filed for divorce. She sold her jewelry collection in January, emptied her children's college funds in February, and took out a second mortgage on the house last month. Why would she do that if she's as wealthy as you said? Because she's not just living above her means, Sadie. She's living above anyone's means. I found evidence of gambling debts, credit card debt, and some kind of investment scheme that went bad. Your daughter isn't just facing a reduction in lifestyle because of the divorce. She's facing financial ruin." The news hit me like a physical blow. Emma really was in financial trouble, just not for the reasons she had told me. She wasn't a victim of an unfair divorce settlement. She was the architect of her own financial destruction. How bad is it? Bad. Based on what I can see, she's probably 6 months away from bankruptcy, maybe less. The divorce settlement will help, but it won't be enough to cover her debts and maintain her current lifestyle. So when she came to me for money, she was desperate, genuinely desperate. But instead of being honest about the situation, instead of asking for help with her real problems, she decided to manipulate you into giving up your life savings to solve problems she created herself. The revelation changed everything and nothing at the same time. I felt a flicker of sympathy for Emma. understanding now that her desperation had been real even if her explanations had been lies. But my sympathy was tempered by anger at the way she had chosen to handle her crisis. If Emma had come to me honestly, if she had admitted her mistakes and asked for help without trying to manipulate and control me, I might have been willing to help her. Not by giving up my house and my independence, but by helping her find solutions that didn't require destroying my life. Instead, she had chosen deception, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. She had treated me like I was stupid and disposable, had tried to steal my money and my dignity. Her financial desperation might explain her behavior, but it didn't excuse it. The next afternoon, I dressed carefully for the meeting with Emma. I chose a navy blue suit that made me look professional and competent, the kind of outfit that would make it impossible for anyone to see me as a confused old woman who needed protection from herself. Patricia's office was exactly as intimidating as I had hoped it would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive artwork, furniture that screamed wealth and power. I wanted Emma to understand immediately that she was out of her league. Emma arrived with her lawyer promptly at 2 o'clock. I watched through Patricia's interior window as they were escorted to the conference room, and I was struck by how different Emma looked from the last time I had seen her. She was pale and thin, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Her expensive suit hung loose on her frame, as if she had lost weight recently. She looked like a woman under tremendous stress, and for a moment my maternal instincts kicked in, and I wanted to comfort her. Then I reminded myself why we were here. Patricia and I entered the conference room together, and I saw Emma's eyes widen with surprise when she saw me. She had probably expected to find me confused and frightened, grateful to see her familiar face in this intimidating environment. Instead, she found a woman who looked completely in control of herself and her situation. "Hello, Emma," I said calmly, taking a seat across from her at the polished conference table. "Mom!" Her voice was small, uncertain. "I've been trying to reach you for days. Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine, Emma. Better than I've been in years, actually." Emma's lawyer, a middle-aged man with the kind of aggressive demeanor that probably served him well in divorce court, leaned forward and addressed Patricia. "Miss Hoffman, my client is concerned that Mrs. Cooper has been isolated from her family and manipulated into making financial decisions that are not in her best interests. We're here to discuss a reasonable resolution that protects everyone involved." Patricia smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Bradley, before we discuss anything, I want to make sure everyone understands the ground rules. This meeting is being recorded, and anything said here may be used in legal proceedings. Mrs. Cooper is here voluntarily and is represented by counsel. She is not under any kind of mental health hold or conservatorship, and she is fully competent to make her own decisions." Emma looked confused. "Mom, what is she talking about? What legal proceedings?" I looked directly at my daughter, the child I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt a strange calm settle over me. "Emma, I know everything." "Know everything about what?" "I know about your real financial situation. I know about the gambling debts and the bad investments and the money you stole from your children's college funds. I know that you've been planning to manipulate me since December, that you consulted with advisors about the best way to convince elderly relatives to liquidate their assets." Emma's face went white. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about. I know that you lied to me about why you needed money. I know that you deliberately made me uncomfortable in your house because you thought it would make me more willing to agree to your demands. I know that you treated your dog better than you treated your own mother. That's not true. I was just trying to. I know that you threatened to keep my grandchildren away from me if I didn't give you what you wanted. And I know that you think I'm weak and stupid and disposable." Emma was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Mom, please, you don't understand. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I need your help." "You needed my money, Emma. There's a difference." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "This contains copies of all the evidence my investigator gathered about your real financial situation. Your gambling debts, your investment losses, your spending patterns, everything. It also contains transcripts of the conversations you had with advisors about manipulating me." Emma stared at the folder like it contained a bomb. "I also have recordings of our phone conversations, including the one where you called me a pushover and dismissed my art as worthless little pictures that nobody cares about." "You were listening to my phone calls?" You pocket-dialed me, Emma. I heard you talking to someone about how easy it would be to manipulate me into giving you what you wanted. Emma's lawyer was looking increasingly uncomfortable. This clearly wasn't the meeting he had expected. Mrs. Cooper, he said, my client is under tremendous stress due to her divorce proceedings. Perhaps some of her communication wasn't as clear as it could have been, but her concern for your welfare is genuine. I turned to look at him, and I could see him flinch slightly under my gaze. Mr. Bradley, your client tried to defraud me out of my life savings by lying about her financial situation and emotionally manipulating me. She treated me with contempt and cruelty, and when that didn't work, she tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Her concern for my welfare is about as genuine as her tears. Mom, please, Emma said, her voice breaking. I made mistakes. I was desperate. But I love you. You're my mother. If you loved me, Emma, you wouldn't have treated me like garbage. If you loved me, you would have been honest with me about your problems, instead of trying to manipulate me into solving them. If you loved me, you would have shown some basic respect for my feelings and my autonomy. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. From this height, everything looked small and manageable. Problems that seemed overwhelming at ground level were reduced to their proper proportions. Emma, I spent your entire childhood teaching you about honesty, respect, and treating people with kindness. I thought I had raised a daughter who would never lie to her mother, who would never try to take advantage of someone who loved her unconditionally. I turned back to face her, and she was sobbing now, her careful composure completely destroyed. I was wrong. I raised someone who sees other people as resources to be exploited. Someone who would threaten to withhold my grandchildren's love as a way to control me. Someone who would look at her mother's life and decide it was worthless. That's not true, Mom. I don't think your life is worthless. Then why did you try to take it away from me? Emma didn't have an answer for that. Patricia leaned forward and placed a document on the table in front of Emma's lawyer. This is a comprehensive restraining order, she said. It prohibits your client from contacting Mrs. Cooper directly or indirectly, from attempting to access her financial information, and from making any further claims about her mental competency. It also revokes any power of attorney or emergency contact designations your client may have had. Emma stared at the document like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Mom, you can't do this. I'm your daughter. Yes, Emma, you are my daughter, and I will always love the little girl you used to be. But I cannot and will not tolerate being abused by the woman you chose to become. I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave, but Emma grabbed my arm as I passed her chair. Mom, wait, please. I can change. I can be better. Just give me another chance. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her face, streaked with tears and desperation. Emma, you had 35 years of chances. You had every opportunity to treat me with respect and kindness. You chose not to. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked toward the door. Mom, if you leave now, you'll never see Madison and Tyler again. Is that what you want? I paused at the door and looked back at her one last time. Emma, you already threatened to keep my grandchildren away from me if I didn't give you money. The only difference now is that I'm not going to let you use them as weapons against me anymore. But they love you. They need you. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our relationship for money. I walked out of the conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear Emma sobbing and her lawyer trying to calm her down. But I felt nothing except a profound sense of relief. It was over. Finally, completely over. Patricia joined me in the hallway a few minutes later, after Emma and her lawyer had left. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely free. Emma's lawyer wants to schedule another meeting. He says she's willing to drop the conservatorship petition and discuss a reasonable reconciliation. I shook my head. There's nothing to reconcile, Patricia. Emma made her choice when she decided to treat me like I was worthless. I'm simply respecting that choice. And if she really does change? If she gets help and becomes the daughter you raised her to be? I thought about that for a moment. It was possible, I supposed, that Emma might eventually understand what she had done and make genuine changes in her behavior. People did sometimes learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. But I was 73 years old, and I had spent too many years hoping Emma would become someone she wasn't. I didn't have time to wait for her to grow into the person she should have been decades ago. Patricia, if Emma wants to change, she's welcome to do that. But she'll have to do it without using me as her practice dummy. I'm done being her victim. That evening, I returned to my suite at the Grandview and ordered champagne with dinner. It felt like a celebration was in order. I had faced down Emma's manipulation, protected my assets, and established clear boundaries that would prevent her from ever exploiting me again. For the first time in months, I felt like I could make plans for my future without worrying about Emma's interference. I could go back to the lake house whenever I wanted, could travel, could focus on my art, could live exactly the life I chose for myself. Emma would probably spend the next few months trying to find ways around the legal barriers Patricia had erected. She might hire private investigators to track me down, might try to contact me through mutual friends, might even show up at the lake house when she discovered it hadn't actually been sold. But all of those efforts would fail, because I had planned for them. Emma was used to dealing with the old Sadie, the pushover who would sacrifice anything to keep the peace. She had no idea how to handle the new Sadie, the woman who had finally learned to put herself first. As I sipped my champagne and watched the sun set over the gardens outside my window, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do, and nobody could take that away from me. Emma had thought she was so clever, manipulating her elderly mother into giving up her independence and her security. She had counted on my love for her, my desire to be helpful, my willingness to sacrifice my own needs for hers. She had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just her mother. I was also a strong, intelligent, resourceful woman who had survived losing her husband, built a successful career, and accumulated enough wealth to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Emma had underestimated me in every possible way, and now she was going to spend the rest of her life regretting that mistake. 3 months later, I was sitting on the deck of a beachfront cottage in Sanibel Island, watching the sunrise paint the Gulf of Mexico in shades of pink and gold. The cottage wasn't large or ostentatious, but it was mine, purchased outright with cash from one of my new accounts. It had everything I needed: a bright studio space for my painting, a garden where I could grow herbs and flowers, and most importantly, complete privacy from anyone who might want to disturb my peace. The transition to my new life had been smoother than I had dared to hope. Jennifer, my personal assistant, had proven invaluable in helping me navigate the logistics of starting over at 73. She had arranged for my belongings to be moved from storage to the cottage, had helped me establish new utility accounts and local services, and had even found me a wonderful housekeeper named Rosa, who came twice a week and spoke to me in Spanish while she worked, helping me brush up on the language I had studied decades ago but never used. My art was flourishing in ways I hadn't expected. The dramatic life changes I had experienced, the emotional upheaval of cutting ties with Emma, and the liberating sense of freedom I now felt had unlocked something creative in me that I hadn't known existed. My paintings had become bolder, more expressive, with deeper colors and more complex compositions. I was working on a Series 1 called Liberation that explored themes of transformation and renewal, and the local galleries were already expressing interest in showing the pieces. More importantly, I had discovered that I genuinely enjoyed living alone. Not the lonely isolation that Emma had tried to convince me I was experiencing at the lake house, but the peaceful solitude of someone who had chosen her own company over toxic relationships. I woke up each morning excited about the day ahead, whether I planned to paint or garden or simply walk on the beach and collect shells. I had made new friends, too. The island had a small but vibrant community of retirees, many of whom were artists, writers, or professionals who had chosen to spend their later years pursuing passions rather than obligations. They were intelligent, interesting people who valued independence and creativity, and they accepted me without judgment or expectation. There was Margaret, a retired English professor who had written 3 novels after leaving academia, and who hosted a weekly book club at her house. There was James, a former corporate executive who now spent his time photographing wildlife and had taught me to identify the different species of birds that visited my garden. There was Sarah, a widow like myself, who had started a small jewelry business and who understood what it meant to rebuild your life after losing someone you loved. These friendships were different from any I had experienced before. They were based on genuine mutual interest and respect, not on obligation or family ties. My new friends liked me for who I was, not for what I could provide for them. It was a revelation to discover that relationships could be so uncomplicated and fulfilling. The legal situation with Emma had resolved exactly as Patricia had predicted. The conservatorship petition had been dismissed with prejudice after Patricia presented evidence of my mental competency and financial sophistication. Emma's lawyer had tried to argue that my decision to cut contact with my daughter was itself evidence of diminished capacity, but the judge had been unimpressed with that reasoning. Emma had made several attempts to circumvent the restraining order, hiring private investigators to track down my location, and even showing up at the lake house, which was still legally mine though held in trust. But David, my security consultant, had anticipated these moves and put countermeasures in place. The lake house had a new security system and a caretaker who was authorized to call the police if Emma appeared on the property. The private investigators she hired found nothing because there was nothing to find. I had disappeared as completely as if I had never existed. According to Carol, who continued to monitor Emma's situation at my request, my daughter's financial problems had continued to worsen after our confrontation. The divorce settlement had provided temporary relief, but Emma's spending habits hadn't changed, and she was burning through her assets at an alarming rate. She had been forced to sell the house and move into a smaller place, had taken the children out of private school, and had given up the country club membership that had been so important to her social status. I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness when I received these updates. Satisfaction because Emma was finally facing the consequences of her choices. Sadness because I took no pleasure in seeing anyone struggle, even someone who had treated me so badly. But my sadness was tempered by the knowledge that Emma's problems were entirely self-inflicted. She had created this situation through her own greed and poor judgment, and she was dealing with the natural results of her actions. The most painful part of my new life was the absence of my grandchildren. Madison and Tyler had been bright spots in my existence, and I missed them terribly. But I had made peace with the reality that Emma would use them as weapons against me, for as long as I allowed contact. Better to have a clean break than to expose them to the ongoing drama of their mother's manipulation campaigns. I had written letters to both children, to be delivered when they turned 18 and were old enough to make their own decisions about relationships. In the letters, I explained why I had felt it necessary to step away from their lives, how much I loved them, and how proud I was of the young people they were becoming. I also included financial provisions that would ensure they could attend college regardless of their mother's financial situation. Patricia had arranged for the letters and the trust funds to be managed by a neutral third party, so Emma would have no way to interfere with my final gifts to my grandchildren. It was a bittersweet solution, but it was the best I could do under the circumstances. I hoped that someday, when Madison and Tyler were adults with their own families, they would understand why their grandmother had chosen to protect herself rather than continue to enable their mother's destructive behavior. My days on Sanibel Island had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. I woke early and spent an hour on the beach, walking barefoot in the surf and watching the shorebirds hunt for breakfast. Then I would return to the cottage for coffee and fresh fruit, usually eaten on the deck while I planned my day. 3 mornings a week I painted. I had converted the cottage's sunroom into a studio, with excellent natural light and plenty of space for canvases and supplies. The Liberation series was nearly complete, and I was already planning my next project, a collection of seascapes that would capture the constantly changing moods of the Gulf. 2 afternoons a week, I volunteered at the island's nature center, helping with educational programs for visiting school groups. The work was rewarding and kept me connected to the community, and the children reminded me that there was joy and wonder in the world, even when personal relationships were complicated. Evenings were for reading, or dinner with friends, or simply sitting on the deck with a glass of wine and watching the sunset. It was a quiet life, but it was also a deeply satisfying one. Every choice I made was my own, every day was structured according to my preferences, and every relationship was based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I had become, at 73, exactly the person I had always wanted to be, but had never had the freedom to become. It had taken Emma's betrayal to show me that I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life according to my own values and desires. One evening in late July, as I was finishing a particularly challenging painting of a thunderstorm over the water, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, since few people had my new number, and those who did usually called during normal business hours. But curiosity got the better of me, and I was surprised to see Patricia's name on the caller ID. Patricia, is everything all right? It's rather late for a business call. Sadie, I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. Emma contacted my office today. She wants to arrange a meeting with you. My stomach tightened instinctively, even though I knew Emma had no power to hurt me anymore. What kind of meeting? She says she wants to apologize. She claims she's been in therapy and has come to understand how badly she treated you. She's asking for a chance to make amends. I set down my paintbrush and walked out onto the deck, breathing in the salt air and trying to process this unexpected development. I had assumed that Emma would eventually stop trying to contact me, that she would move on with her life and accept that our relationship was over. The idea that she was still thinking about me, still trying to find ways to reconnect, was both touching and troubling. What do you think, Patricia? Is this genuine, or is it another manipulation? It's impossible to say for certain. People do sometimes change, especially when they've faced serious consequences for their behavior. But given Emma's history of deception and manipulation, I would be very cautious about believing this represents a genuine transformation. I leaned against the deck railing and watched the lights of fishing boats moving slowly across the horizon. Part of me was tempted to agree to the meeting, to give Emma one more chance to prove that she had learned from her mistakes. The maternal part of me that had never stopped loving her wanted to believe that she was capable of change, that the daughter I had raised with such hope and care was still somewhere inside the woman who had treated me so cruelly. But the practical part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself from emotional manipulation, knew better. Emma had had 35 years to learn how to treat me with respect and kindness. She had had multiple opportunities to be honest with me about her problems, and to ask for help without resorting to deception and cruelty. She had chosen differently every single time. Patricia, what would happen if I agreed to meet with her? We would structure it very carefully. The meeting would take place in my office, with me present, and it would be recorded. Emma would not be allowed to ask you for money or make any demands about your living situation or financial arrangements. It would be purely an opportunity for her to apologize and for you to decide whether you want any kind of future relationship. And if I decide I don't want a relationship, then the restraining order remains in place and Emma would be prohibited from contacting you again. I thought about it for a long time after Patricia and I hung up. I walked on the beach until well past my usual bedtime, trying to sort through the complicated emotions Emma's request had stirred up. On one hand, I had built a wonderful life for myself, one that was peaceful and fulfilling and completely free from Emma's chaos. I was happy, genuinely happy for the first time in years. Did I really want to risk that happiness by reopening old wounds? On the other hand, Emma was still my daughter, and if she had genuinely changed, if she had really learned to understand how her behavior had affected me, then maybe there was a possibility for some kind of limited relationship. Not the close, trusting bond we had once shared, but perhaps a cordial, respectful acquaintance that would allow me to have some contact with my grandchildren. By the time I went to bed, I had made my decision. The next morning, I called Patricia and told her I would agree to one meeting with Emma, under the conditions she had outlined. If Emma could demonstrate genuine remorse and understanding of what she had done wrong, if she could show that she had truly changed, then I might be willing to consider a very limited, carefully structured relationship. But if the meeting was just another attempt at manipulation, it would be our final contact. Patricia scheduled the meeting for the following week at her office. She would fly to Florida to meet with me beforehand, and we would drive together to ensure I felt completely supported and protected. The week passed slowly. I found it difficult to concentrate on my painting, and my usual morning walks on the beach felt restless and distracted. I was nervous about seeing Emma again, about reopening emotions I had worked so hard to process and move past. Margaret noticed my agitation when I missed 2 book club meetings in a row, and showed up at my cottage with a bottle of wine and a concerned expression. "Sadie, you look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" I told her about Emma's request for a meeting, about the complex feelings it had stirred up. Margaret listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me talk through my conflicted emotions. "Do you think I'm making a mistake?" I asked her when I had finished explaining the situation. Margaret was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in her glass and watching the liquid catch the evening light. "I think," she said finally, "that you're brave enough to face whatever Emma has to say, and strong enough to protect yourself if she tries to hurt you again. But I also think you need to be very clear about what you're hoping to accomplish with this meeting." She was right, of course. I had been so focused on whether or not to agree to the meeting that I hadn't really considered what I wanted to get out of it. "I guess I want to know if the daughter I raised is still in there somewhere," I said. "I want to know if Emma is capable of genuine remorse, or if this is just another manipulation. And if it is another manipulation, then I'll know for certain that I made the right choice in cutting contact. And I'll never have to wonder again whether I should have given her another chance." The day of the meeting arrived gray and humid, with thunderstorms threatening on the horizon. Patricia had arrived the evening before and stayed at a hotel near my cottage. We had spent hours going over the ground rules for the meeting and discussing how I would handle various scenarios depending on Emma's behavior. As we drove to Patricia's office, I felt surprisingly calm. The nervousness I had experienced all week had been replaced by a sense of resolution. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine the final shape of my relationship with Emma. After today, there would be no more uncertainty, no more wondering what might have been. Emma was already waiting in the conference room when we arrived. She looked different from the last time I had seen her, thinner and more fragile, with gray streaks in her hair that she hadn't bothered to color. She was wearing a simple black dress and minimal makeup, a far cry from the polished professional appearance she had always maintained. But it was her eyes that struck me most. They looked haunted, marked by the kind of deep sadness that comes from genuine loss and regret. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Emma looked like someone who understood that she had made serious mistakes. "Hello, Mom," she said quietly as I took my seat across from her. "Hello, Emma." Patricia activated the recording equipment and stated the date, time, and participants for the record. Then she nodded to Emma, indicating that she could begin. Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands, which were folded tightly in her lap. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Mom, I don't know if you can ever forgive me for what I did to you. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, how badly I hurt you, and how much I've lost because of my own selfishness and stupidity." She paused, taking a shaky breath before continuing. "I've been in therapy for 3 months now. Dr. Richardson specializes in family relationships and addiction issues. She helped me understand that my behavior toward you wasn't just about the financial pressure I was under. It was part of a pattern of entitlement and manipulation that I've been using my whole life." Emma reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes before they could overflow. "I treated you like you existed solely for my benefit. Like your feelings didn't matter, like your life didn't matter, like everything you had built for yourself was just there for me to take whenever I needed it. I convinced myself that it was okay because I was your daughter, because family members were supposed to help each other. But that wasn't what I was asking for, was it? I wasn't asking for help. I was demanding that you sacrifice everything for me while giving nothing in return." I listened without interrupting, trying to gauge whether Emma's words reflected genuine understanding or were simply what she thought I wanted to hear. "The gambling started 3 years ago," Emma continued, her voice getting steadier as she talked. "Richard was working late all the time, the kids were busy with their own activities, and I was bored and lonely. A friend invited me to a casino night at the country club, and I won $200 on my first try. It felt incredible, like I was special, like I was good at something." She laughed bitterly. "Of course I wasn't good at it. Nobody is good at gambling in the long run. But by the time I figured that out, I was already in too deep. I was borrowing money from friends, taking cash advances on credit cards, even stealing from the kids' college funds. And instead of asking for help, instead of being honest about what I had done, I decided it would be easier to manipulate you into solving my problems. Emma looked directly at me for the first time since she had started talking. I knew exactly what I was doing when I called you that night. I knew that if I sounded desperate enough, if I made you think I was about to lose everything, you would come running. And I knew that if I made you uncomfortable enough in my house, you would be willing to agree to almost anything to make the situation better. The honesty was brutal, but it was also exactly what I needed to hear. Emma wasn't making excuses or trying to minimize her behavior. She was acknowledging the calculated cruelty of what she had done. The worst part, Emma said, her voice breaking, was listening to that recording of myself talking about you like you were nothing, calling you a pushover, dismissing your art, talking about wearing you down like you were an opponent in some kind of game. Mom, I listened to that recording, and I didn't recognize the person speaking. I couldn't believe that I had become someone so cold and cruel, especially to the person who had loved me most in the world. She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks as she struggled to continue. I know I've lost you forever. I know that nothing I can say or do will undo the damage I've caused. But I needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than I've ever been about anything in my life. You deserved so much better from me, and I failed you in every possible way. Emma fell silent, exhausted by the effort of her confession. The room was quiet except for the sound of her quiet sobs and the distant rumble of thunder from the approaching storm. I sat there for a long time, processing everything she had said. The apology felt genuine, unlike the manipulative performances I had witnessed from her in the past. She had taken full responsibility for her actions, had acknowledged the specific ways she had hurt me, and had made no demands or requests for reconciliation. But an apology, no matter how heartfelt, couldn't undo the months of pain and betrayal I had experienced. It couldn't restore the trust that had been shattered when I realized my own daughter saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. Emma, I said finally, I appreciate your honesty, and I believe that your remorse is genuine. I'm glad you're getting help for your gambling addiction, and I hope you're able to rebuild your life in a healthier way. Emma looked up at me with something like hope in her eyes. But, I continued, understanding what you did wrong doesn't erase the fact that you did it. Feeling sorry doesn't undo the months I spent questioning whether I had any value as a person beyond what I could provide for you. Being in therapy doesn't change the fact that you were willing to destroy my life to solve problems you had created for yourself. The hope in Emma's eyes faded, replaced by resigned sadness. I know, she whispered. I know it's too late. It's not about it being too late, Emma. It's about the fact that I've built a new life for myself, a life where I'm valued and respected and treated with kindness. I'm happy now, genuinely happy, in a way I haven't been in years. And I'm not willing to risk that happiness by reopening myself to someone who has proven capable of such cruelty. Emma nodded, tears still flowing down her cheeks. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. I want you to know that I don't hate you, I said. I will always love the little girl you used to be, the daughter I raised with such hope and joy. But I can't have a relationship with the woman you became, even if you're working to become someone better. What about Madison and Tyler? Emma asked quietly. They miss you. They ask about you all the time. The mention of my grandchildren sent a sharp pang through my chest, but I had prepared for this question. I've made arrangements for Madison and Tyler, I said. When they turn 18, they'll receive letters from me explaining why I felt it necessary to step away from their lives. They'll also receive financial support for college and beyond. If they choose to contact me when they're adults, I'll be open to that relationship. But I won't put myself back in a position where my love for them can be used as a weapon against me. Emma flinched as if I had slapped her, but she didn't argue. She knew exactly what I was referring to. We sat in silence for a few more minutes, both of us processing the finality of what had just been said. There was no anger left between us, no bitterness or recrimination, just sadness for what we had lost an acceptance that some things couldn't be repaired. Finally, Emma stood up and gathered her purse. "Thank you for giving me the chance to apologize," she said. "I know I didn't deserve it." "Everyone deserves a chance to make amends," I replied. "But making amends doesn't always mean getting forgiveness." Emma nodded and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle and looked back at me one last time. "Mom, I hope you're happy in your new life. I hope you have everything you deserve." "I do," I said. "I really do." After Emma left, Patricia and I sat in the conference room for a while, neither of us speaking. Finally, Patricia turned off the recording equipment and looked at me with concern. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Sad," I said honestly, but also relieved. I needed to hear her acknowledge what she had done, and I needed to make it clear that understanding doesn't automatically lead to reconciliation. Now I know that I made the right choice, and I can move forward without wondering what might have been. Do you think she's really changed? I thought about that question as we drove back to my cottage. Emma's apology had seemed genuine, and her understanding of her behavior appeared to be real. But change was more than just understanding what you had done wrong. Change required consistent action over time, and Emma would have to prove her transformation to other people and other relationships. "I think she understands what she did," I told Patricia, "and I think she's genuinely sorry. But whether she's capable of sustained change is something only time will tell. I'm just not willing to be her practice ground while she figures it out." The drive back to Sanibel Island was peaceful, with the thunderstorms having passed and left the air clean and fresh. As we crossed the causeway onto the island, I felt a familiar sense of homecoming, of returning to a place where I belonged completely. Patricia stayed for dinner, and we sat on my deck watching the sunset and talking about my plans for the future. I was thinking about taking a painting workshop in Tuscany, about maybe writing a memoir of my experience, about all the possibilities that lay ahead for a woman who was finally free to choose her own path. "Sadie," Patricia said as she prepared to leave, "I want you to know how impressed I am with the way you've handled this entire situation. A lot of people in your position would have given in to the manipulation, or would have spent years trying to fix a relationship that couldn't be fixed. You had the courage to choose yourself, and that's not easy for someone who spent decades putting other people first." After Patricia left, I sat alone on my deck with a cup of tea, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 6 months ago, I had been a lonely widow living quietly at a lake house, trying to convince myself that I was content with the small role Emma had allowed me in her life. I had accepted the breadcrumbs of attention and affection she threw my way, grateful for any contact with my daughter and grandchildren. Now I was a woman who had reclaimed her power, who had refused to be diminished or exploited, who had chosen dignity over family harmony. I was living exactly the life I wanted, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. The cost had been high. I had lost my relationship with Emma, and I would probably never see Madison and Tyler again while they were children. But the alternative had been to continue being treated as less important than a dog, to sacrifice my independence and self-respect for the illusion of family closeness. I had chosen differently, and I had never regretted that choice for a single moment. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about what Emma had said about not recognizing the person she had become. I understood that feeling, but from the opposite perspective. Looking back at the woman I had been 6 months ago, the woman who had been willing to give up everything for a daughter who saw her as worthless, I barely recognized her either. The difference was that my transformation had made me stronger, more independent, more authentically myself. I had become the woman I was always meant to be, the woman I would have been all along if I hadn't spent so many years trying to be what other people needed me to be. The next morning, I woke early and walked on the beach as the sun rose over the Gulf. The water was calm and clear, reflecting the soft pink and gold of the morning sky. Pelicans flew in formation just above the waves, and sandpipers scurried along the water's edge, leaving delicate tracks in the wet sand. I thought about Emma, probably waking up in her smaller house, facing another day of the consequences she had created for herself. I hoped she would continue with therapy, would find healthier ways to deal with her problems, would learn to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. But her journey was hers to take, and I was no longer responsible for guiding or supporting her through it. I thought about Madison and Tyler, getting ready for school, maybe wondering why their grandmother had disappeared from their lives. Someday, when they were adults, they would read my letters and understand that I had loved them enough to protect them from being used as weapons in their mother's manipulative games. I hoped they would forgive me for the years of absence, would understand that sometimes love means walking away. But mostly, I thought about the day ahead of me, full of possibilities and choices that were entirely my own. I would paint for a few hours, working on a new piece that captured the way the morning light looked on the water. I would have lunch with Sarah, who was excited to show me her latest jewelry designs. I would spend the evening reading a novel Margaret had recommended, something I had chosen simply because it interested me, not because it served anyone else's needs or expectations. It was a simple life, but it was entirely mine. And for the first time in my 73 years, that was enough. As I walked back toward my cottage, I noticed a young woman jogging along the beach with a golden retriever running beside her. The dog bounded through the waves, pure joy radiating from every movement, while the woman laughed at his enthusiasm. They looked happy together, content in each other's company, each bringing out the best in the other. It reminded me of the relationship I had once hoped to have with Emma, one based on mutual love and respect, where both people brought joy to each other's lives. That relationship had never really existed, I realized now. It had been a fantasy, one had maintained by overlooking Emma's selfishness and excusing her cruel behavior. But watching the woman and her dog, I understood that such relationships were possible. I had found them with my new friends, with the people who had welcomed me into their community, without expecting anything in return. I had found that kind of uncomplicated affection with myself, learning to enjoy my own company and value my own thoughts and feelings. Emma had thought she was so clever, making me sleep in conditions worse than her dog's. She had intended it as a humiliation, a way to break down my resistance and make me more willing to comply with her demands. Instead, she had given me the perfect metaphor for our relationship. She had shown me exactly how much she valued me, and I had finally listened. Now I was living outside the empire she thought she had built, the empire of manipulation and control that had defined our relationship for too many years. I was free from her demands, her cruelty, her casual dismissal of everything that mattered to me. Emma could keep her empire. I had found something much better, a kingdom of my own, where I was the only ruler, and every decision was made with love and respect for the person I had finally learned to value above all others, myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.